Welcome back to another episode of Keen on Australia, where we're talking about all things moving to Australia, living in Australia, and life in Australia. Today, we've got something that's hopefully going to be helpful to a lot of people when they move, and that's we're going to be talking with a rental manager about how you get rental homes and how it all works. So, why don't you tell them a bit about yourself, Naomi?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Darren. I really appreciate it and hope I can be of help to other people thinking of moving over. As you can hear, I'm not actually from Australia myself. I'm originally from Scotland and I moved over in 2009. So I'm familiar with moving halfway across the world as well. I went into real estate in 2010, moved from sales into property management in 2014, and then I worked for a few different agencies and I've had my own rental business since 2021. And here we are. So hopefully we can be of some assistance.
Oh, that's awesome. Like I say, it's always great when our guests have actually done the move themselves because they understand the pressure and
Yeah.
all those sort of things for people. And then obviously you've got your key knowledge on what we're going to talk about. So all the advice we'll talk about today will be just general advice. Obviously, check anything out for your situation personally if you need any specific advice. And hopefully the questions we ask Naomi will be able to help you with your move. So if people want to start looking at rental properties and that, where should they start looking? Where's a good place for them to find them?
Yeah, so it's probably fairly cliche, fairly obvious, but I would definitely recommend realestate.com. .au. The reason for that is it is primarily the most used platform for especially for the Gold Coast and Brisbane. There are other platforms, but they really aren't used as much as realestate.com.au. They really do have the main share of the market. And so that would be probably the best place for you to go, especially if you're wanting to rent through an agent. And I'll touch on that later as to why that's probably a better option if you can.
Awesome. And then what about like you see a lot of ads pop up on Facebook Marketplace and things like that? What's
Hmm.
the difference between like Facebook Marketplace and somewhere like Domain or Real Estate where it's licensed users? What's actually different?
Yeah, so marketplace obviously it tends to be either private landlords who are going to look after the property themselves, so you're dealing direct with the owner, or it could be a house share situation. So you could actually find that the person you're dealing with on marketplace isn't actually the owner. It could just be a leaseholder on a lease who may or may not have permission to actually sublet that room or property to you. So it from my point of view, obviously I'm a little bit biased. I always think it's better to go through an agency. The reason why is they have obviously a very deep and clear understanding of the legislation. So it's probably a safer bet for any tenant because the agent will know your rights. And also, I always feel that if you're going through an agency, it means that all your rent payments and everything is recorded on the trust accounting software. So what that means is it will produce a ledger for you at any time during your tenancy at the end, which is a very, very important and strong document for when you want to move on and go to your next rental property. Sometimes you can even use that to purchase a property. Sometimes you can use a ledger to show the lender that you are very responsible with your money and you're good with your money. So that's another good reason to try and stick to an agency if you can, and they don't generally appear on marketplace.
And I'm gonna guess the big difference too would be everyone in your industry that works with clients has to be fully licensed here, don't they?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So even just employees, they have to have what's called registration, and that does include a police check. And obviously, they need to be trained up to the latest legislation. And then any agencies has to have a principal who, of course, hold a full license. And then there's obviously insurances, and yeah, there's a lot of bit more concrete, backing to that person.
So if you're overseas and you're a little bit worried about scams and all that sort of thing, at least if you're dealing
Mm,
with a company, probably off real estate or one of the bigger websites like that, everything they give you is something they're going to be able to tell you how to check up they're real, aren't they? Like you'll have a register you're on for your license, you have your
yeah,
trust account, all those sorts of things. So
yeah.
for someone coming from overseas, it's probably a little bit safer than we've all heard the horror stories of people taking out an Airbnb and trying to then pass
Mm,
it off as a rental and just taking a heap of deposits on it and then go on the next day.
mhm.
That sort of thing, you're a lot more protected on the bigger websites, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the big thing to watch out for, if you see an ad on the marketplace or whatever, and it's trying to ask you for a deposit or a bond or 2 weeks rent up front without you actually viewing the property, if the owner is, trying to pressure you into transferring funds, then that to me that screams scam, and I would definitely avoid it at all costs. Scams are getting more and more sophisticated as well. So if you can, I would definitely stick to the main platforms, and you can certainly do your due diligence before you apply for anything you can definitely do a Queensland government registration check on that company. You can Google them, you can make sure they're actually in existence, etc.
And would it be fair to say if you had anyone from overseas say, hey, look, we're just not a little bit sure, can you tell me about your license and how to look it up? Any legitimate company is not going to be offended by that at all, are they? They're going to point them straight in the right direction to check out that
Yeah,
they're legit and that they exist.
yeah, definitely. So the license number, um, yeah, they can easily provide that to you, and then you would be able to go on and double check that the license number matches who they say they are on the website.
So they've
Yeah.
found a place, they think they like it, all those sort of things. I know it can be a little bit different, but what's sort of the standard way they apply for a property here?
So there is some new legislation coming in. That's actually, they finally let us know that's going to start on May the 1st, 2025. There will actually be one standardized application form. So that will make it a lot simpler and streamlined for everyone. But at the moment, it tends to be an online application form. Most agencies use To Apply. There's also another one by realestate.com called Ignite. They're both fairly similar, and you can usually apply online for properties using that. And it'll just ask you to upload your documentation, fill in a few details. That's usually the standard way of applying. I know that we talked about, we mentioned when we were working out these questions, you said, do you need to view properties? So every agent's different. Every agent's different. Some agents have to meet you. Some of them are not, are a bit more flexible. Yeah.
Yep. So on viewing a property though, obviously if you're on the other side of the world or that, is it okay normally to organize a friend or hire someone else to view the property for you? Will a lot of agencies accept that, or is it pretty much you
Yeah.
can't view it, it's hard?
Yeah, definitely. So we do get contacted quite a lot, people that are interstate or overseas. And what we always say to them is you're more than welcome to send a representative, wherever that may be. That's absolutely fine. And they can obviously come take a video on your behalf. If it's tenanted, we have to get the tenant's permission, but normally they're okay with it. We also do sometimes do videos ourselves, and we can provide a WhatsApp video to, we usually send that via WhatsApp. That could be to someone like yourself or a representative, or over to the tenants direct themselves.
Awesome. And then they're doing the application, they're filling everything in, they get to income. What's the story here? Everyone talks about the income rule. When you're looking at property and you're thinking, what can I actually afford in Australia? How is your income going to affect what you can afford here?
Yes, so it's going to be an interesting little one, because obviously some people are coming over, they may not have secured employment yet. So the biggest, probably the best thing to have is a copy of your savings, because that will basically substitute the lack of employment. If there is a lack of employment, at least you can show that you've got this nice healthy lump sum in the bank, which will act as a buffer until you are in a position to secure employment. The best, I was also going to mention that it might be a good idea to get a reference from your employer that you're just leaving as well, just to say how much you were on, and that you were a bit of a reference, so that you can see what sort of a person you are. And then with the income rule, so it used to be around, the affordability ratio used to be around 30% of your net income. That would be equal to the rent on the property that agents thought you'd be able to afford. Because there has been such a surge in rental figures, that 30% is really no longer really realistic anymore.
Yep.
And we're finding that we're going to 35% and in some cases 40%.
Yep.
So the best thing is, if even if you're going for something that's a little bit higher than 40%, if you can prove that you're already paying something that's above that, or you might want to say, yes, this is how much our mortgage payments were back in New Zealand, it was more than this figure of 40%, then you can always add that in as well to prove that you're more than capable of handling that amount.
Cool. And for most people, though, if they are sitting there looking at lots of different properties and they're not really sure and they're thinking, I can afford that, but maybe I can't, I'm not sure. If they went 40%, so say they're earning 2 grand a week, they said 800. If they looked at properties 800 and below, they've probably got more chance of getting them than if they looked over 800, haven't they? If you start pushing that affordability, that's where it gets a lot harder for you to get an approval, doesn't it?
Well, you can look at that in two ways actually, because 800 is quite a popular rental figure, so you will have more competition at that price. If you go a little bit higher to say 900 or 1000, you might find that the competition is thinner, and therefore you might have a better chance of getting it, even if the affordability is a little bit, you're pushing your affordability a little bit. So I would definitely try to stick to around the 35%, maybe 40. But like I said, the higher you can go, the less competition you're going to have, and the more likely you are to find a property quicker.
So there's a hot tip for people. If you can afford it and you've got a little bit more budget, if you sit above sort of the average rent price, there's just less competition for you. So there's one big hot tip for everyone listening. Rental term. What's normal over here? So first time you get a rental, how long would you normally expect you're going to have to take it for?
Yeah, so definitely the majority of leases are usually always 12 months.
Yep.
You might sometimes get one for 6 months if the owner needs to move back in or something like that. And occasionally we also get asked, can we have a 2-year lease? And sometimes the owner will say yes, because they're looking for that long-term stability as well. But generally it is just the 12 months.
Cool. And if say someone does get a lease, for whatever reason they pick the wrong city and they need to move again, or their job asks them to move, or they're fortunate enough they can go buy a house after a few 6 months or whatever, they talk about a break lease. What sort of things is that roughly going to cost someone if they did have to get back out of a 12-month lease?
Yeah, so there is some new legislation coming in to regulate these charges somewhat. It hasn't come in as yet, but at the moment, again, there's not really any concrete fees that all agencies must charge. But I'll give you what is generally charged.
Yep.
So usually there's what they call a break lease fee or a reletting fee, and that is normally equal to 1 week's rent, and it should be the rent that the tenant's paying, not if it's going up. The 1 week's rent plus GST of 10%. And then there's usually an advertising fee as well. That's the realestate.com charge. For us at the moment, that's just gone up to $159, but it may vary agent to agent, because of realestate.com like to charge different prices for different areas sometimes. And there's also, there is some liability as well, that you still have to pay the landlord compensation for the rent that would have been owed up to the day before the new tenancy begins. And there is going to be a little bit of legislation coming in, so that the closer you are to the end of your lease, the less the costs are going to be, which I think is quite fair, because if you need to break your lease 1 month out, it doesn't really seem fair that you have to pay the whole overall cost. So there is a little bit of legislation coming in for that, which I think will be good. So basically, yeah, if you just take 1 week's rent, maybe about 160 for advertising, and then a little bit of rent. So my advice, I always say this to tenants, is if you do need to break lease, give as much notice as possible, because it's the agent's obligation to mitigate your losses. So the more notice you can give them, the quicker they can pop it on the internet and find tenants, so that there's very little crossover between them moving in and you moving out, and that will keep the cost down as much as possible for you. So if you can, 4 weeks is ideal. 4 weeks notice if you can. That should be ample time to get somebody in.
Oh, and in the current Gold Coast market, you would like to think that
Yes.
hopefully they can get someone like that, because it's still pretty busy here. What about their application? What can people do to make their application look really appealing? Is there Is there any things when you're going through all these applications you get all the time, you see hundreds of them? Are there certain things that you just look at and go, yep, that one really stood out to me because they put some effort into whatever?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that make up a really good application. First of all, some people do add a cover letter. So maybe no more than one page, maybe two paragraphs, something like that. Maybe with a photo as well, so that you can see obviously you can see who's applying, and a little bit about themselves. Not too much, but not too little either. It's just nice to get a bit of a picture because landlords love to know a little bit more about who is moving in. Pictures as well of pets are really useful. It's nice to be able to see, okay, it's a little pet, or it's a little bit bigger than I imagined. It's nice to see, especially if they're cute. It's always like nice to, have a little smile while you're looking through the applications. Also, it's really good to know the age of the pets, because that makes a big difference as to how active they're going to be and how much damage they may or may not be likely to cause. Also, it's really good if you've got savings of any kind. I know that next year, from the 1st of May, we're not going to be able to ask for bank statements, possibly, which I think is crazy, but definitely include a copy of your proof of balance if you have any savings, because if you've got, 20 grand, 100 grand, or whatever it might be sitting there, it's a very, very good indication of how you are with your finances, and also that you do have that nice backup should you need it. One of the strongest documents, which you may not have if you're a homeowner, is your rental ledger. So if you've rented before and you've got a beautiful, perfect rental ledger with very consistent payments, exactly 7 days apart or exactly 14 days apart, and you're always up to date, or even better, you're always paying in advance, that's a very strong document. And it just shows that it's a historical document, and you can always think, well, if history will probably repeat itself, and we're very likely that this person's going to be very reliable going forward. Sometimes we get applications that are too big, so I wouldn't. Sometimes we get 70, 80 pages worth of application, which can be a little bit much. But at the same time, sometimes we only get 22 pages, and then you go, oh, that's not quite enough either. So just make sure that you're putting in at least 2 copies of ID if you can, and some sort of a ledger or proof of savings is really important.
Yep.
Your pay slips, photos of your family, photos of your pets, a little bit of a statement. And if you can, like I wouldn't worry too much about character references, because to me they don't carry as much weight, because you could just type one up yourself, or just get a family member. But definitely if you've got an agent that can give you a written reference on a headed piece of paper, that's good. And if you've sold your home, then you could always get the selling agent to write a little bit of a letter for you, because they would have been in your home, they would have seen how you live, seen how you present it. And that's a really good indication of how you live, and then so they can then just basically vouch for you in like a little letter. And even better is to give your address, because then we can Google it and we can look at the listing and go, oh wow, look how beautiful this house was that they just sold, and then it can show the owner how their property is going to look going forward at routines.
Perfect. That's some great tips. So it's a good one too. Some of those tips in there of the things that are changing that you can't ask for, but they're really important. So when those changes happen, am I right that people can give you those documents, but you just can't ask for them? So if someone voluntarily gives up their savings, and there's no asking for it, they just say, hey, look, I'm applying and this is where I've got my money. That's not an issue, is it? They can give it to you. You just can't ask for it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Look, I probably can't really answer that yet, because it's
Still changing.
it's still being formulated. But what it says, I've got the REIQ document here, and it says, from May the 1st, property managers will be required to use a prescribed form, and they will only be permitted to request prescribed types of information. So what that means is, whether or not there is going to be a provision where someone can upload a bank statement after the May the 1st. I'm not sure.
We'll have to find that one out.
So
Another show
we'll
after
have
May
to find that one
1st.
out. Yeah, yeah, but hopefully they can, because it's really important for homeowners that have just sold, because they don't have a ledger. So instead, we need to see some sort of a financial. So
Is the bank mortgage statement a good thing for them to print out and give to you that shows they've regularly made all their payments on their mortgage? Is that a handy one for you?
yeah, I used to ask for that, but again, that's probably equivalent to still being under the bank statement umbrella, because I guess it's still a statement of sorts. But that again, maybe that could be a little loophole. I'm not sure, but yeah, we definitely did used to ask for mortgage statements instead of the ledger. Yes.
And around the world, it's a bit different. New Zealand rents weekly, parts of Europe and the US and that rents monthly. What's going to be the norm they have to expect over here? What's most people paying their rent, or do you get to choose?
Yeah, so definitely we try to be, it does vary from agency to agency. Some agencies will try and stipulate the day that you pay your rent on to make sure that it's in the account on time. But we try to be flexible with tenants if they want to pay monthly, weekly, fortnightly. We've even got some tenants that pay bi-monthly. They pay like $4,000 or $5,000 every second month. I always say to tenants, pay however you want as long as you're up to date. That's fine. That's fine with us. So there is a bit of, we do like to be flexible, but most people pay weekly or fortnightly. Yeah.
Perfect. And you look at ads at the moment and you'll see, I'll pick a number, $500 a week, but price will be $650 a week from the 10th of October. What's that about? You see heaps of ads at the moment like that. Why have they got two prices on them?
Yes, that's the lovely legislation change that came in on the 6th of June. So we've had 5 sets of changes. So yeah, it is always good to be with an agency if you can, because there's a lot to keep up with at the moment. So there's now legislation where a rent cannot go up more than once within a 12-month period. And it used to be attached to the tenancy, which meant that if someone broke lease or moved out after 6 months and it was a brand new tenancy starting, the rent could go up. But now they've attached that legislation to the property. So now if someone breaks lease after, say, 6 months and the rent went up at the beginning of the tenancy, that rent cannot go up until the rest of that 12-month period has expired. So that's why you're seeing, if someone's breaking lease, you're going to be paying what they pay for that first 6 months, and then the landlord will may take advantage of the 12 months period expiring and pop that rent up in the middle of the next lease. We're seeing that sometimes it's happening after 2 months into the lease, sometimes it's happening after 8 months into the lease. We've got a few ourselves at the moment. What we're actually going to start doing is we're going to make our leases longer to get rid of that problem. So for example, we've got one that's a lady that's broken lease now. Her rent was due to go up in November. So we're actually going to make that lease 14 months so that we don't get caught in this cycle of having to put it up 2 months into a lease, which is just a little bit messy. So
Thanks for
I think
explaining that. Now, you talk about references and those sorts of things. Let's talk about one of the most important references, your furry friends. If someone's bringing their cat or their dog, what would you like them to do? What's a good thing they can do to help their case out when they have got an animal? Is there any sort of references that are good to have? You said before about having a nice, cute photo. What's the best thing they can do when they have got a pet?
Yeah. So if I was to just describe the ideal pet reference. So first of all, like you said, you'd have a photo. Then, if you can, you'd have a written reference from your current property manager or from your selling agent, just to say that the pet was happy, healthy, looked after, groomed, you didn't see any damage, that kind of thing would be really good as well. And then there is a section in the current application forms which has a space for, like, I think it's a space for license number from the council. Is the pet up to date with their, with any like medical
Vaccinations and
it's
stuff.
not vaccinations, it's like
Yeah, the treatments and stuff they're meant to have.
Yeah, like yeah. And like most people leave that blank, but if that's filled in, I always think, oh, it does kind of give this feeling that maybe they're very, very responsible pet owner because they've gone to the effort of getting all these things and filling them in. So if you've got all those little boxes filled in, a nice photo, nice little reference, you've got the weight, you've got the age, you've got the breed, you've got the name, and adding in name is good because it gives you that you're more likely to connect to the pet. This sounds crazy.
But it's okay, Naomi. You can admit you're a pet lover and you like getting photos of
I
people's
do.
dogs
I
and
love
stuff.
getting the little pictures, and then I'm always like, can I use them on social media? So yeah, so those things really do help get the pet over the line because it is tricky. I've got to admit, most owners say to us, "Oh, if we can we try and go? Can we try and have property without pets?" And I always say, "Oh, we can try, but it's going to be pretty difficult. So many people have cats and dogs, so it's definitely worth if you do have animals, it's definitely worth marketing them on your application form as best you can."
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been a great help for all our listeners today. If there's any tenants out there that want to apply for one of your properties, or maybe we've got some budding landlords out that want to move and start their investment journey again, whereabouts can people get a hold of you if they need to ask some questions, maybe about looking after a rental property for them, or finding out if they can apply for any of your properties?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to jump on our website, which is www.baberandco.com.au. On there, that's where we have all of our current rental properties. And also, if you do want to get in touch with us, you can contact us through that website. Also, if you want to register for rental alerts, so every time we list a new rental, you'll be emailed. There's also a rental alerts button at the bottom as well, just so you can keep up to date with what's new.
Perfect. I'll chuck all that up on our pages when we post all this anyway, so people can just click the link and find you straight away. That'll make it easy.
Awesome.
Thank you for having you again today.
Thank you, Darren.
Really informative for all our listeners, and everyone out there, obviously keep tuned in, stay subscribing on Spotify. We'll have some more shows out in the future. We're going to be talking to someone about super soon and transferring super schemes over. They'll help with buying homes. We've got some more people coming on telling about their journey, how life's been for them in their first 6 to 18 months living here. And then we'll be looking at more and more things about places around Australia you can move. I hope you enjoy it all. Keen on Property on Spotify, and find us on Facebook. We'll talk to you again next time.
Thanks.
I've got that button.